Hey there! Ready for a deep dive into the world of microfinance? We're talking about We Are Not Able to Live in the Sky by Kardas-Nelson. And let me tell you, this book is a wild ride.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how this simple idea, giving small loans to fight poverty, turns into this huge global movement, and not always for the best.
Right, you think microfinance, you think helping people, but this book, it gets complicated.
Totally. And to understand it, we got to go back to the start. Think 1970s Bangladesh. The country's still recovering from war, depending on foreign aid, and, desperate for solutions.
And then comes Muhammad Yunus. It's almost like a movie, right? He's looking at traditional aid and seeing how much gets lost in the bureaucracy. Then, this chance encounter changes everything.
The story of Yunus and Sufia Khatun, the woman who made stools, has become like the foundation of microfinance. She couldn't afford bamboo to even make the stools, so she had to borrow at these crazy high interest rates. Yunus realizes that even a small loan, what we now call microcredit, could change everything for her.
He's like, forget collateral, let's bet on people. And he focuses on women like Sufia because he sees them as these untapped business owners. And let's be honest, they were really reliable when it came to paying back the loans.
It was a radical idea at the time, this whole idea that these tiny loans, along with the group lending thing where everyone's depending on each other, could empower people and lift up entire communities. And you see how these early Grameen Bank stories, they captured the world's attention.
Oh, for sure. It was like this beacon of hope, empowering women, creating entrepreneurs, and it seems so simple to replicate everywhere.
And replicate they did. Groups like Results, they're a US-based anti-poverty group, were really important in getting microfinance out there on the world stage. They saw this documentary about the Grameen Bank and they were like, this is it. This is how we can actually create lasting change.
They weren't the only ones though, right? I mean, even the Clintons were on board.
Absolutely. Bill Clinton has this lunch with Yunus in the early 90s, and it was a big deal. And Hillary Clinton, when she was First Lady, she became a huge advocate for microfinance globally. It just fit with their whole idea of using economic empowerment to create social change.
So this small idea from Bangladesh is suddenly this global experiment with everyone from NGOs to the World Bank getting involved.
Yeah, and the 1997 Microcredit Summit, that was a defining moment. Picture this. Global leaders, people making policy, development experts, all in one room, and they're all focused on this goal of reaching 100 million families with microcredit. The energy, the optimism, you can just feel it.
Like you can practically hear the hype, right? Microfinance was the thing in development, but this is where We Are Not Able to Live in the Sky takes a turn. We start seeing this more complicated reality. We meet Aminata, a woman in Sierra Leone, and her story shows us that maybe those success stories weren't the whole picture.
Yeah, Aminata's story. You start to see the downsides, that fine line between giving someone power and putting them in too much debt. It's something we're going to see again and again as we go through this story.
Okay, so we've gone from this inspiring story of one woman and her stool business to a global movement. But like any big experiment, there are always unintended consequences, right?
Absolutely. And this is where We Are Not Able to Live in the Sky really digs into what happens when you take a simple idea and try to make it work on a global scale. It gets messy.
It's like baking, right? You have this killer recipe, works great for a small batch, but try to make 10 times the amount, suddenly you're dealing with ratios and oven temperatures you never even considered. Sometimes it's just not going to work.
Totally. And that's where things get really interesting with microfinance. Remember Compartamos in Mexico? That's a big turning point in this story.
Yeah, that was a whole thing.
Big time. So picture this.
Yeah.
It's 2007. Compartamos, which is this microfinance institution, they go public on the stock market. Huge financial success. Investors are celebrating it, but then...
people start asking where all that profit is coming from.
Exactly. Compartamos was charging these, insanely high interest rates, and they were targeting some of the poorest people in Mexico. It caused this huge debate. Can you really call it success when it's built on the backs of people who are already struggling?
It's that tension between making money and doing good in the world. You've got investors wanting to see profits, and then you have the original goal of helping people escape poverty.
And it wasn't just Compartamos. This was happening all over the industry. As microfinance got bigger, it started attracting more private investors. And when that happens, the pressure to make money, it just explodes. Suddenly, it's not about helping the poorest of the poor anymore. It's about lending to people who seem less risky, people who can borrow more money and handle those high interest rates.
So the people microfinance was supposed to help, they were getting pushed out, or even worse, they were ending up trapped in debt.
Exactly. And think about Aminata again, the woman in Sierra Leone trying to get her yogurt business going. This is where her story really hits home. The book talks about how she's hit with all these rising costs, unexpected stuff, and the loan, which was supposed to help her, it just becomes this huge burden.
It shows you how giving someone a loan, it's not enough, especially with things like inflation, problems, getting their products to market, all these outside factors that can completely derail their plans.
You said it. We are not able to live in the sky. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. It shows how this focus on profits, it had a dark side. You see these aggressive lenders, people harassing borrowers, and this awful cycle of debt that's almost impossible to escape.
It's heartbreaking, like those suicides in Andhra Pradesh. It makes you realize that even something like a loan, which is supposed to be empowering, can have devastating effects if it's not used responsibly.
That's true. And it's hard to place blame.
Yeah.
You know, lenders pushing loans, borrowers maybe not understanding all the terms, and then this lack of regulation and support.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
So what happens? Does the industry just keep going down this path?
Well, there were attempts to fix things. The book talks about efforts to put limits on interest rates, make the loan terms clearer, and protect borrowers from these predatory practices.
Like putting up some safety rails. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The book makes it clear that these attempts to fix things, they often ran into walls. Take interest rate caps. Sounds like an easy fix, right? But lenders found ways around them, adding on extra fees or making people have these forced savings accounts.
So you think you're getting a decent deal and then bam, hidden costs.
Exactly. It's like when you're booking a flight online and the price seems amazing, then you get to the end and they hit you with baggage fees and seat selection charges. It's so frustrating. The book uses Cambodia as an example. They had interest rate caps, but borrowers were still getting slammed with these really high effective interest rates because of all these hidden costs.
And what about places like Sierra Leone, where Aminata is? What was going on there?
The book says there was basically zero oversight. Lenders were using the police and the courts to pressure people who owed money, even if it wasn't a lot. Can you imagine the fear?
It's tough. Shows you how hard it is to regulate an industry, especially when you're trying to protect the most vulnerable people. So then what? If microfinance has all these problems, what are the alternatives?
The million-dollar question, right? And that's where we are not able to live in the sky. Gets really interesting. It pushes us to think beyond just financial access. It starts exploring other ways to fight poverty.
So we're talking bigger picture now, not just loans.
Exactly. The book talks about things like direct cash transfers, like what Give Directly is doing. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I think so. They just give cash to people living in poverty, right? No strings attached. Seems kind of risky.
It does, right. But that's the whole idea. They're basically saying, look, we trust people to make the best choices for themselves and their families. They give them the money and let them decide how to use it. Could be starting a business, paying for school, or even just buying food.
Okay, so instead of assuming we know what's best, we empower people to make their own decisions. What does the book say about how well this works?
It's really interesting. Studies show that these cash transfers can be really effective.
It's like they actually make a difference.
Yeah, they improve people's lives and give them the power to choose what's important to them, which isn't always the case with microfinance, where there are often limits on how you can use the money.
Makes sense. So cash transfers are one option. What else does the book look at?
Well, there's also universal basic income, UBI. It's a much bigger idea. It's about giving everyone a regular income, no matter what their job is or how much money they make.
That's a pretty radical idea, but it does make things simpler, doesn't it? No more trying to figure out who deserves help or what counts as poverty.
Exactly. And while there are definitely arguments for and against it, the book suggests that approaches like this, ones that address the root causes of inequality, might be better in the long run than just relying on microfinance.
Especially in places where poverty is a huge problem and there are so many interconnected issues to deal with. It's about going after the source of the problem, not just putting a bandage on it. It makes you wonder, though, if microfinance is so flawed, why are people still borrowing?
It's the big question, right? And we are not able to live in the sky tackles it head on. Imagine being in Sierra Leone. Jobs are scarce, poverty's a daily reality, and you need money now. What do you do?
It's not like you can just walk into a bank and get a loan.
Exactly. So for a lot of people, even with the risks, these microfinance loans, especially the ones that are easy to get, they might feel like the only option. They need to eat, maybe invest in their little businesses, or deal with some unexpected emergency.
It reminds me of Ramatu, the woman selling rice. The book talks about how she works so hard, but it seems like everything that can go wrong does. Prices going up, more competition, bad roads, it all makes her life harder.
From Atu's story, it's like a perfect example of how microfinance can't fix everything. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. Even if she could get a fair loan, all these other problems, she can't control them.
It's like giving someone a toolbox full of amazing tools, but they're stuck in this workshop with no power and a leaky roof. Sure, they can make a few repairs, but they're limited by their surroundings.
Exactly. And that's why the book wants us to think bigger. Instead of just focusing on financial inclusion, maybe it's more important to fix those bigger problems.
So investing in things like education, healthcare, making sure the roads are good, things like that, making it so people actually have a chance to succeed.
You got it. Those are the long-term solutions that create real, lasting change, not just a temporary fix. We are not able to live in the sky. It leaves us with this really thought-provoking idea. What if, instead of just focusing on individual success, we focused on working together?
That's an interesting thought. Switching from every man for himself to how can we all help each other out? And there are already groups doing this, right?
Totally. The book talks about this group in India, ASEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association. They've been fighting for women who work in the informal economy for decades. Fair pay, health care, social safety nets, all of it.
That's amazing. They saw how individual solutions weren't enough and realized that working together, that's how you make real, lasting change.
It's empowerment on a bigger scale. They're not just handing out loans, they're getting people organized to demand a fairer system for everyone. And that's really what We Are Not Able to Live in the Sky is all about. It's a call to action. It's saying we need to stop looking for quick fixes and start focusing on real systemic change.
It's a message that goes way beyond just microfinance. It makes you question your assumptions and challenges you to join the fight for a more just world.
Think of it this way. The microfinance movement, it started with good intentions, but the way it's evolved, it shows you how hard it is to solve these deep-rooted problems like poverty. It's a reminder that while financial services are important, they're not some kind of magic solution.
We have to go deeper. We have to address the root causes of these problems, empower communities, and create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope it leaves you feeling hopeful and ready to take action. The fight for social justice is a marathon, not a sprint, and we all have a part to play in building a future where everyone can live with dignity and achieve their full potential.